So here, uh, so in the last class, so I said about constructor with arguments and constructor without arguments. So after this, let us see. So after this, let us see working with the so let us see working with instance variables. So we'll see what is this instance variables or object level instance variables or object level variables, right? Let us see instance variables or object level variables. So every object is having some properties. For example, if we take student object, so student object is having properties like roll number, name, and course. If we take student is object, okay, student object is having some properties. So these properties you define it. So these properties, these are called which variables? Instance variables. These are called instance variables. The same thing you call it as object level variables. So these are called properties. These are called instance variables or object level variables. Okay. So you define the properties by declaring instance variables within the class. For example, if it is employees object, so employees having some data, employee number, employee name, salary. So what is this employee number, employee name, salary? So this employee number, employee name, salary are called as instance variables. These are called properties. So properties, instance variables, object level variables are the same thing. You call it as what? Fields. So how many fields are there here? 3 fields: employee number, employee name, and salary. 3 fields are there, and these fields will define the data held by the object. Okay, these fields define the data held by the objects. So these are called as fields, and these are called as instance variables. The same thing you can call it as properties. Okay, the same thing is called as a properties. Instance variables or fields are the same thing, you call it as what? Properties. So how you create this instance variables? How you create this instance variables? So instance variables are created. Instance variables are created in different ways. In different ways. The first one is using constructor, using constructor method. Second one is using, you can also create it using instance method. But most of the times you try to initialize, means you try to create You try to create it using which method? Constructor method. So instance variables. So instance variables, memory is allocated. Instance variables or object level variables, memory is allocated. Memory is allocated within what? Object. So these variables define, this variables defines the values of object. These variables define what? Values of the object. Okay, each object is having some values, right? So these values are defined by using which variables? Instance variables. Okay, instance variables or object level variables. Memory is allocated within object, and these variables define the values. These variables defines the values of the object. This variables defines the values of the object. Okay, these variables define the values of the object. So these variables are bind with. Okay, within class, these variables are bind with. These variables are bind with self. Okay, these variables are bind with the self. Means these variables are accessible. You can say these variables are accessible within what? Instance methods. Instance methods or object level. Instance methods or object level methods. These variables are accessible within instance methods or object level methods. So because which methods are having self, object level methods or instance methods are having which argument? Self argument. Okay, which methods are having self here? Instance methods or object level methods having which argument here? Self. Okay, suppose, yes, for example, okay, for example, I'm trying to write a class. What is the name of the class here? Student. So student is having roll number, name, and course. Now this is called as which method here? Constructor method. This is called which method here? Constructor method. And inside the constructor method, so what you're doing is inside the constructor method, okay, okay. So what you're doing is you are creating self dot properties. Okay, self dot roll number equal to none, self dot name equal to none. Okay, self dot course equal to what here? None. So here these are called which variables? Instance variable. This is also which variable? Instance variable. Okay, this is also which variable? Instance variable. All these are which variables here? Instance variables. Roll number is an instance variable. Name is an instance variable, and course is also called which variable? Instance variable. So there are three instance variables: roll number, name, and one more is what here? Course. Okay. So I said these variables are bind with object. I mean self. These variables are bind. Suppose if I'm writing x equal to 100, then I can call this as which variable? Local variable. If I'm saying x equal to 100, this is called as which variable? Local variable. But instance variable always bind with what here? Self. Instance variable is bind with what here? Self, right? If I'm writing x equal to 100, this I can call it as which variable? Local variable. This is which variable? Local variable. Local variable. Okay, instance variable is there, and one more is what here? Local variable is there. instance variable is there, and there's one more variable called local variable, right? So what will happen whenever I create? So what will happen whenever I create object of a class? Whenever I create object of a class. For example, I'm saying here student one. Okay, student one equal to student. What I'm saying, student one equal to what here? Student. Student one equal to what here? Student. Means you are creating object of which class here? Student class. So whenever you create object, so what will happen when you create object of a class? So what will happen when you create object of a class? So what will happen when you create the object of a class? So this is, now what is this here? Student one. So on creation of object, which one is called here? Constructor. On creation of object, it will call the constructor. And this constructor is bind with the current object. So this constructor is bind with which object? Current object. So what is the current object for this constructor? Student one. What is the current object for this constructor? Student one. So here self is referring to which object here? Student one. Now you are saying self dot. Self is referring to which object? Current object. And in this, it allocates memory for what here? Roll number. It allocates memory for what here? Roll number. Now self dot. Self is referring to student one. Okay, student one is having any, see here, student one is having any property called, student one is having any variable called roll number? No. So it will create a variable called what here? Roll number. So then self dot name equal to none. Then self is referring to a student one. It will create variable name with the none. Okay, then self dot, self is referring to the student one. And within this, it look for the variable course. And this course is defined as what again? None. So how many variables are created here? 3 variables. So that is roll number, name, and one more is what? Course. Suppose if I create one more student object, if I create another student object, so what will happen? One more student is created. One more student is created. Now this is student 2. So on creation of object, it will call the constructor. And this constructor hold self hold the address of which object? Current object. And inside this object, it will create a variable called roll number. So the value of roll number is none. It will create a variable called name. The value of name is none. It will create one variable course. And the value of course is what again? None. So just try to see here. Now every student is having how many variables here? 3 variables. And these are called instance variables or object level variables. So this will define the properties. This will define properties of the objects. Okay, this will define the properties of which one? Object. This will define the properties of the object. Roll number is one property, name is one property, and course is what? Another property. So we can assign the values. Now I'm saying student 2 equal to student. I can say student 1 dot roll number equal to 1. Okay, student 1 dot name equal to some Naresh. And student 1 dot course equal to some Python. Student 2 dot roll number equal to 2. And student 2 dot name equal to some Suresh. And student 2 dot some course equal to what here? Java. So print, you are trying to print. Okay, student one dot, roll number. You are trying to print student one dot, roll number, and student one dot, name, and student one dot, course. So print format. You are trying to print student two dot, roll number. Okay, student two dot, course, name, student two dot, name, and student two dot. What is it? Another one, course. You are trying to display both the details. So once I run this, now you can see one is a roll number, Naresh is a name, and Python is a course. Okay, so in the same way, 2 is a roll number and Suresh is a name, and Java is what again? Course. Okay. Okay, so this is how you are trying to define properties. It is as simple as like this. For example, if you take complex number 1 equal to complex. Now complex is a predefined data type or user defined predefined. But student is a user defined. Okay, complex is a predefined and student is a user defined. So if I want to print the complex number 1, I'll say complex number 1 dot real. This complex number is having how many variables? 2 variables. One is real. Complex number 1 is having 2 variables. One is real and one more is what? Imaginary. Complex number is having 2 variables. One is real and one more is a imaginary. So once you run this, complex number 1 dot. So complex number 1 dot real. So what is the default value? 0.0 and 0.0. So here also I can print default values. What is that format? Student 1 dot roll number. What is initially roll number of student? None. Student 1 dot name. What is initially name of the student 1? None. Student 1 dot course. What is initially course of the student? None. Student 1 dot. So what is initially student 1 roll number? None. Okay, name is a none and course is also what here? None. Okay. Now this is how you are trying to define the details here. Okay, so this is a constructor. So initially, but whenever I create a student, then the student is created with what here? None. But this is a constructor with arguments or without arguments? Without arguments. Now you can write a constructor with arguments so that you can define the initial values of it. You can write a constructor with argument so that you can define the initial value of it. For example, employees. Now every employee is having, okay, now this constructor receive employee number, name and salary. So these arguments are called which variables? Local variables. Okay. And self dot employee number. This is which variable? Instance variable. So to this object level variable, assign which variable? Local variable. To this object level variable, assign which variable? Local variable. To this object level variable, assign which variable? Local variable. So where I said self dot employee number equal to E and self dot employee name equal to N and self dot salary equal to what here? S. Okay, now this is the constructor with the arguments. Now I cannot create employee like this because here I'm calling constructor with arguments or without arguments. But within the class you have a constructor with what? Arguments. Now I have to call only the constructor available in the class. I cannot create the object by using the constructor which is not available in the class. Which constructor is there in the class? Argument constructor. Then I have to give the value of E because these are required arguments or not. Yes. So I have to give the value of E. 101 is a employee number. Suresh is the employee name. And 5,000 is what here? Salary. So what will happen? Okay, what will happen here is so it will create which object? Employee object. It will create employee object. So this is employee one. What will happen on creation of object? It will call the constructor. What will happen on creation of object? It will call the constructor. And this constructor hold the reference of which object? Employee one. And this constructor receive how many values? 3 values. It receives employee number. It receives employee name. It receives what here? Salary. How many things it receives here? 3 things. So the value of E is 101, which is assigned to employee number of self. Self is what here? Employee one. In employee one, is it any variable called employee number? No. So it will create variable employee number by assigning 101. Okay, self dot. Again, next point is self dot employee name. So there is no variable called employee name. So it will create employee name with the value what here? Suresh. Now I try to define the initial values. So it will try to create one variable called salary with the value 5,000. So it is created with how many variables here? 3 variables, number, name, and one more is what? Salary. Going on. So if you want to read this, you can read this by saying employee one dot. So employee one dot employee number. So employee one dot employee name. Employee one dot what is that? Salary. But I cannot create this object. I cannot create this object without sending values. Now you can see 101 is a number, Suresh is a name, and 5,000 is what? Salary. But I cannot write like this. If I write employee 2 equal to employee. Now this time you are calling which constructor? Non-arguments. Without arguments, but here. So init, employee dot init missing 3 required positional arguments. Okay, right now, yes. So you can call only the constructor which is exists, but you cannot call the constructor which is not exist, right? You can call the constructor which is exists, but you cannot call the constructor which is not exists. Now this is number, and this is a name, and this is what your salary, right? So the variables, the variables are members declared inside class. Declared inside class can be private, so it can be protected, or it can be what here public. See, whatever variables you declare inside the class, those variables can be private. So those variables can be protected, or those variables can be what here public. So this private, protected, public. So this will define accessibility of the members. Private, protected, and public defines the accessibility of members of class. So the advantage of, generally, what is the advantage of encapsulation? Advantage of encapsulation is data hiding. What is the advantage of encapsulation? Data hiding. So what is data hiding is, already I said, preventing data access, preventing data access from unrelated operations or functions, or outside functions, or outside functions, or members of other class, members of other class. So the advantage of encapsulation is data hiding. So what is data hiding is preventing data access from unrelated operations or functions, or outside functions, or outside members of the class. Outside functions or outside members of the class. So that is done by using this. Okay. Advantage of encapsulation. So first we'll see private members. Private members. If members means variables or methods of class are private, they are accessible. They are accessible within same class. They are accessible within same class, or you can say members of same class, but cannot accessible, accessible outside the class, cannot accessible outside the class. So the meaning is, in object oriented data hiding, is achieved. In object oriented data hiding is achieved using, in object oriented data hiding is achieved using, or by declaring members, achieved by declaring members of the class as what here private. By declaring data or variables inside the class as what? Private. By declaring variables inside the class as what? Private. For example, if you are working with the predefined classes, for example, if you take list is there, I'll say list 1 equal to list. So what will happen? List object will be created. What will happen? List object is created. Okay, what will happen is list object is created. But this object is created with some properties. This object is created with some properties or some variables. But can you access these variables? Or can you access these properties? No. You cannot access these properties because these properties are declared as what? Private. You cannot access these properties because this properties is declared as what here? Private. So it is declared as a private. You cannot able to access it. You cannot able to access these properties because these properties are declared as what here? Private. If you want to perform anything on this data, what you're doing, you're trying to take the help of methods. If you want to add the data to this property, you're using a method called what? Append. If you want to insert data to this property, you are using which one? Insert. But you are not accessing this data what? Directly. You cannot access this data directly because this data is declared as what here? Private. So it means listed data is operated by only the methods of what? List. But this data you cannot operate directly. But you can operate it by using provided methods. You can operate it by using provided methods. You can operate it by using provided methods, but you cannot operate it what? Directly. Okay. So in object oriented, data hiding is achieved by declaring members of the class is what? Private. Okay, but private members private members are prefixed with what? Double underscore. So any member which is prefixed with double underscore, that you can call it as which one? Private. Private members are prefixed with double underscore, which is prefixed with double underscore. So that you can call it as which one? Private. Double underscore, right? Double underscore. So that is a private. For example, I try to develop a class called some A. A is one class. Within A class, I create two variables, object level variables. X is 100 and Y is what here? 200. But these are object level variables. Object level or instance. These are object level or instance variable. So this is also object level or instance variable. So one is a X and one more is what here? Y. So what will happen when I create object of this class? So I create object of a class by saying ob is a 1 equal to what here? A. So what will happen when I create object of a class? So there is a object 1 is created. So what will happen on creation of object? It will call the constructor, and this constructor hold the address of which object? Object 1. This constructor hold the address of what? Object 1, right? Object 1. And within this, you are saying self dot. What is this member underscore X? equal to what? 100. So there is one more variable created y equal to what? 200. But this x and y are what here? Private. This x and y are what here? Private. But is it main is a member of A class? Is it main is there inside the A class or outside? Outside. Outside means, is it this is a member or non-member? Non-member. This is not a member, right? Because is it main is there within the class or outside the class? Outside the class. So outside the class means, is it a member of the class or non-member of the class? Non-member. Is a non-member is able to access this private variables? No. Okay. So this data is what here? Private. It is hidden. This data is what here? Hidden. If I'm trying to access it by saying print, if I'm trying to access it by saying print obj1 dot double underscore x, print obj1 dot double underscore what? Y, it will try to access the value of x. What is the value of x here? 100. It will try to access the value of y. What is the value of y here? 200. So the value of x is 100. The value of y is what here? 200. Okay. So, but is it able to access it? No, because this data is what here? Private. So is it this gives an error or not? Yes. So privates are not accessible outside. So that gives an error. It will not print anything. Okay. That gives what here? Error. If I'm trying to access it by saying obj1 dot underscore underscore x, obj1 dot underscore underscore what? Y. So immediately it is given error saying that A object has no attribute called what? X. But A object is having attribute called X or not? Yes. X is there but cannot access by main, because main is not a member of A class. A, okay, main is not a member of which class? A class. Okay, is it main is there outside the class or not? Yes. So if the data is a private, how it is accessible? Now, this gives what here? Error. This gives what here? Error. Right? Because the data is what here? Private. So then how this private data is accessible? So you try to access this private data with the help of what? Public methods. So by default, the members of the class are public only. Yeah, you can see. You can see. Yeah, you can see that. So how this okay, output is error. Output is what here? Error. Output is error. So it is given attribute error. It is given attribute error saying that A object has no attribute called what? Underscore underscore X. There is no attribute called underscore underscore what? X. But is it attribute underscore underscore X is exist or not exist? Exists. But you cannot able to access it because it is a private. You cannot access it because it is a private. Then how to access this private data? How to access this private data or variables? How to access this private data or variables? So this private data is accessible with the help of public members or public methods. With the help of what? public methods. See, public members are not prefixed with anything. Public members are not prefixed with any underscore. Okay. So default members of the class are what here? Public. Because by default, it is not prefixed with any underscore. By default, it is not prefixed with any underscore. So default members of the class are what here? Public. Default members of the class are what here? Public. So public members are not prefixed with any underscore. Public members are not prefixed with what? Any underscore. Okay. Public members are not prefixed with any underscore. So here publics are accessible outside the class. Publics are accessible where outside the class. Okay, right. Suppose now I want to access this x and y variables. I want to access this x and y variables. I cannot access directly. So this is given error, right? Then how can I access these variables? I write a method. Here I write a method. Now this method is a public. If it is a private, I have to put some double underscore, right? I have to put some double underscore. Now there is a method I'm writing. Okay, get x. Now this is which method here? Object level method. So the method which is having the first argument as a self is called which method? Object level. So using this self, it can able to access this x or not? Yes. So here I'll say return self dot underscore what? X. So I try to write another method called get y. I try to write another method called get y, and this will return self dot underscore what is that? Y. So using this self, I can able to access which data? Object level data. So object level variables are accessible only in which methods? Object level methods. If I want to access the x value, I'm saying value 1 equal to object 1 dot get x. Okay, I'm saying value 2 equal to object 1 dot get y. Okay, print, I'm trying to print value 1. I'm trying to print what? Value 2. I try to print both the values, that is, okay, value 1 and value 2. Suppose, assume that this is, so what is this here? Object 1. I create an object 1. I create an object 1. So the address of this particular object 1 is 1000. So on creation of object, it will call the constructor. And this constructor hold the address of which object? Object 1. And within object 1, it will create how many variables? 2 variables. One is x whose value is 100. There's another one which is y whose value is what? 200. Okay. But this data is what here? Private. This data is private. You cannot access this. Then how can I access this? I'm calling the method getX. And this getX is holding the address of which object? Object 1. So return self dot. Self is holding which object? Object 1. And object 1, which value is returning? X value. What is the object 1 X value? 100. Is assigned to which variable? Value 1. Now you are calling getY method. And this getY method hold the address of which object? Object 1, because it is bind with object 1. Then self is holding which object? Object 1, and return which value? Y value. So the Y value is written into what? Value 2. So getX returns a value 1. GetY returns what here? Value 2. So the value 1 is 100 and value 2 is what here? 200. Value 1 is 100 and value 2 is a 200. Okay. Yes. So you're trying to execute this. X value is 100 and Y value is what here? 200. So when the data is a private, you're manipulating the data. See, that is where object level variables are manipulated using which methods? Object level methods. Object level data is manipulated using object level methods. Like, for example, you create a list. That is what I said. So I cannot access list data directly. If I want to manipulate it, I use methods. Append for adding it. Okay, using append, I can able to add it. If I want to remove it, I'll use what? Remove. But I cannot access. Can I access the variables of list directly? No. Can I access the properties of the list directly? No. Because properties of list are what? Private. So when the data is a private, you try to access. So that is abstraction, right? So data abstraction means hiding the data and by revealing only which one? Methods. If the methods also private, then that object will not be usable. That object becomes what? Unusable, because everything is hidden, right? If the data is a private, you cannot use that because everything is hidden. Everything is hidden. So you cannot able to access it. Everything is hidden and you cannot able to what? Access it. Even methods of the class are also declared as what? Private. Suppose there is a class A is there, M1 is there. So this is not prefixed with anything. Now this is called which method? Public M1 method. Because it is not prefixed with underscore. So I write underscore M1, M2. Now this is which method? Private method. So private M2 method. So public M1 method and private M2 method. So I'll try to say object 1 equal to A. I can call M1 method. I can call M1 method. I can call M1 method because M1 method is a public. So public M1 method. But what will happen if I'm saying underscore M2? Then immediately it is given what? Error. Because M2 is which method? Private. Now, can you able to access this method? No, you cannot access this M2 method because it is a private. Okay. So even you can try to declare the methods also as what? Private. Even you can able to declare the methods also as what? Private. You can also declare methods as also a what? Private. So in this case, you get public M1 method. You get public M1 method, but there is an attribute error saying that there is no M2 method in the class. saying that there is no M2 method in what here? Class, right? There is no M2 method inside the class. Okay, right. So for example, there is a class called calculator. So there is a class called which one here? Calculator. So the name of my class is what here? Calculator. What is the name of the class here? Calculator is a class. So calculator is a class. So this class is having number of methods. Yes. What calculator is having is, whenever I create a calculator, now. I initialize the calculator with two numbers. So self dot. So calculator is created with two numbers. Number one, and calculator is created with another number called number two. But these numbers which are there in calculator are what? Private. Suppose I create a calculator 1. Okay, now. So calculator 1 equal to calculator with 10 comma 20. So what will happen? Calculator is created. What will happen? Calculator is created. So this is a calculator 1, and this calculator 1 received two values. So that is a 10 and 20, and it is also hold the address of which one? Calc 1. So this calc 1 is created with number 1 whose value is 10, and it's created with number 2 whose value is what here? 20. But can I add these two values? Can I write here? Can I write here saying the result 1 equal to calc 1 dot? Can I access the number 1? No. Because number 1 is what here? Private. Can I access calc 1 dot underscore underscore number 2? No. Because number 2 is also what here? Private. So I cannot access this because this is what here? Private. Then how can I add these two values? Then you have to provide here methods. So what operations you want to do it, you provide here. So there is a method called which one? Add. So this will return self dot number 1 plus self dot number 1 plus what? Number 2. So there is a method called sub. Okay. So return self dot number 1 minus self dot number 2. So there is a method called multiply. So this will return self dot number 1 into self dot number 1 into number 2. So there is a method called division. Okay, division. So where I'm saying return. Okay, return self dot number 1 divided by self dot. What is that? Number 2. So you create calculator and do the operations. So calc 1 dot add. Result 2 equal to calc 1 dot subtract. Result 3 equal to calc 1 dot multiply. Result 4 equal to calc 1 dot, what is that operation? Division. Then you can print all the results. Result 1, result 2, result 3. And there's one more result which is called as result 4. I try to print all the results. Result 1, result 2, result 3, result 4. So you can see 30 minus 10, 200, 0.5. So 30 minus 10, 200 and one more value is 0.5. So that is how you are trying to work with this. So the methods what you write inside the class. So the methods what you write inside the class performs two operations generally. So methods defined inside class performs how many operations? Two operations. Performs two operations. Methods defined inside class perform two operations. One is setter operation and one more is getter operation. Whatever methods you write inside the class, so that will do how many operations here? Two operations. One is a setter and one more is what? Getter. An operation which modify the values of object is called a setter operation. An operation which doesn't modify the values of object is called which operation? Getter operation. So set is for assigning the values to the object and get is for reading the values from the object. So this operation will not, okay, this operation will not modify. Okay, so the operation which modifies, that you can call it as what? Setter operation. But the operation which doesn't modify is called which operation? Getter operation. So if you see add is there, is it add is a setter or getter? Getter. Because using add, are you modifying the values of calculator? No. Using sub, are you modifying the values of calculator? No. So I can say add method, sub method, multiply method, division method. All these are which methods? Getter methods. Because this methods not modifying the values of what? Calculator. These methods are not modifying the values of calculator. So you can call these methods are which methods? Getter methods. These are not setter methods. But you're right. The methods even, suppose I want to modify the values of number 1 and number 2 of calculator. Then I have to write which methods? Setter methods. For modifying, I have to write which methods? Setter methods. For modifying, I have to write which methods? Setter methods. Okay. Okay, anyway, we'll see how to work with the setter operations and what? Getter operations in the next class. But see, there is no class on Monday. Okay, there's no class on Monday. Next class will be there on Tuesday, right? So we'll see on Tuesday again. Okay. So thank you. We'll see on Tuesday.